Hey guys, today we're in the book of 1 Samuel chapter 25. This starts out with an amazing first verse, and now Samuel died. Samuel the prophet, Samuel the priest has died. He has basically given his whole life to Israel, and now we see that he dies. But immediately it says that Samuel dies, but it says now David rose. It's just a picture of God always working. Though God stops with one man, he continues with another. So Samuel goes down, but David goes up. And David rises, and we we hear about a man named Nabal. Nabal was a horrible man. He was a very rich man, though, and he had lots of sheep and goats, and it was in harvest season and shearing season. And so he's there. We find out that he's married to a beautiful, smart lady. But all this time that David has been hiding in the hills, he has been taking care of Nabal's sheep and goats and shepherds. Remember, David is a shepherd at heart himself. And so while he was there and while the Philistines and Saul was roaming around doing everything, he kept the sheep, the goat, and the shepherds safe. And so now that it's at harvest time, now it's the appropriate time, David sends some men to say, hey, we've taken care of your money, right? We've guarded your money and hasn't let anybody steal or kill your sheep or your goats. So why don't you return the favor? Why don't you pay us something? Now, he didn't ask for a price. He left it up to Nabal to say, hey, just give us what you think you owe us. And instead of Nabal being nice, he was mean and he was hateful. And he said, absolutely not. I'm not giving you anything. We even see, he says, who is David? Everybody knows who David is. This is an insult. He's insulting David. In verse 11, it says, shall I take my bread and my water and my meat that I have killed for my shears? Notice that word, my. We see the true heart of Nabal, where he thinks everything is his. It's not the Lord's, it's his. And so he will not share his things for God's man and for the men that protected his shepherds and his investment, his sheep and his goats. And so some men come back and tell David that, no, he's not going to give us anything. And David becomes furious. He becomes mad. He tells 400 soldiers to get their swords on. They're going to war. As they're going to Nabal, he even says, verse 22, if by morning I leave so much as one male of all who belong to him. This was a planned massacre. David and his men were going to wipe out everybody from Nabal's family. Well, one of the shepherds had seen this whole thing and heard about it, and they know Nabal. They know he's a wicked man. So what do? They go to his wife Abigail, and Abigail is a beautiful and smart woman, and she knows what should have been done. She knows what is right, and so she does exactly what Nabal should have done, and she prepares bread and wine and food and all these things to go out and to try to beat David before he comes back to kill his husband and their children and all the workers and all the things that are going to happen, right? And so she does. She cuts him off at the pass before David gets to her husband Nabal, and she basically begs for forgiveness for her husband, right? She says in verse 28, please forgive the trespasses of your servant. She talks about how she knows her Lord is fighting for David. She tells him to remember her in the past, or remember her in the future. And so she just lays it out in full submission, even though her husband is garbage and he's not nice and he's mean and he doesn't care about the Lord and doesn't care about David. But she ultimately falls on her face before David and says, please forgive him. And that's exactly what he does. And we see in verse 32, David said to Abigail, blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, who sent this day to meet me. That Abigail stopped David from sinning. Remember, David heard the news. He was furious. He comes back. He was going to kill Nabal and everybody. But she steps in and does the right thing. In doing the right thing, it prevents David and his men from going further in sin. Now, in reality, they already have sinned. They're mad. They're full of hate. They're full of vengeance. This is not what Christians are called to be, right? But she stopped him before he goes in and kills everything. And so David accepts this. They eat, they do everything. Abigail goes back to her house, to her tent. And as she comes in, her husband Nabal is throwing a party. He's throwing a feast. And in a party, of course, he's drunk. So she doesn't say anything. And the next morning when he sobers up, as she tells him everything that happens, and it says in verse 37, that when she told him these things, his heart died with him, and he became as stone. And 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal. And so even though David did not kill him, the Lord killed him, because that was the justice. That was the Lord was supposed to do, not what David was supposed to do. Sometimes we want to take things into our hands and not wait for the Lord to do them. And that's exactly what was happening. And so this happens. David hears that Nabal died, and he instantly knows this was the Lord. The Lord did this. He knew that this death was God's judgment. And David said, blessed be the Lord who has avenged the insult that I received at the hand of Nabal. And so David sends some messengers and says, hey, Abigail, you're cute, you're beautiful, you're smart, you want to be my wife. And of course, because she said she would be his servant, she says, of course, she will be his wife, and he takes her as a wife. But notice verse 43, David also took Achinoam, Achinoam of Jezreel, and both of them became his wives. So not just one, two, but he already had another wife, right? He had his first wife, Saul's daughter, but he says that Saul had given Michal, his daughter, David's wife, to Palti, the son of Lesh, who was of Galim. And so kind of Saul calls the divorce, if you would use that term. And so he had no wife because his wife went to another man. So he asked Abigail, but he also picks up another one. So David comes in with two wives. And so I know we see multiple wives in the Old Testament, but remember from the very beginning, the book of Genesis, as they were in the garden, we find out that God's plan is for one man and one woman to unite and be together forever. So even though David has multiple, it's not what God's desire is. And we will see many problems come out of this, that one sin will turn into many. Hope that makes a little bit more sense, and we will see you tomorrow in chapter 26. God bless.